want to talk about how I got to writing, because when you're good at something, and I like to think I'm good at writing, there's a sort of idea that people have that you knew that's what you're going to do your whole life, and it was the plan all along. And maybe that's the case for some people, you know, maybe for guys like Michael Jordan, who got cut out of a junior team and then spent all summer practicing to get on the team the next year. They know what they're meant to do, but I don't think that's the case for everybody. I think the best place to start to look at how I got to writing is high school. Like a lot of people, I didn't fit in high school. High school wasn't like the best and brightest years. It didn't help that I skipped a grade and I always felt sort of behind everybody else everywhere except in the actual schoolwork. And my experience with high school, despite my school having some of the best, most interesting, most diverse extracurricular activities, my experience was show up, do what I need to do, and go home. Now, the thing about my school was sport was mandatory, so after every day of school, you would participate in a given sport, team sports. In the fall, I would usually do cross-country running, though at my pace it was more like cross-country walking. In the winter, I would play basketball, even though I was not very good at it. And in the spring, I would do rock climbing. We actually had a rock climbing wall in the gymnasium. I liked rock climbing the best because while you did have somebody to work with, somebody who belayed you to keep you from plummeting to your doom, even though I almost did that one time, it's yourself against the wall. I never really liked team sports because I didn't like relying on other people. I didn't like doing the best that I could and then still losing because somebody else didn't show up to do the work. It's probably the only reason why I wasn't in terrible shape in high school, because I was the kind of kid who would not have done anything physical unless you forced him to, or unless it was a martial art. I loved martial arts my whole life. I've been training in one for most of my life, and that's really the only physical thing I did for the longest time. So in that sense, being forced to play sports in high school, even though I hated it at the time for the most part, was definitely a good thing. So when I got home from school, I usually had a ton of time. I did my homework last minute. I never studied for tests. I maintained a solid 75% average doing the bare minimum. So that's me a lot of time. Of course, like a lot of teenagers, especially of that era, I was big into video games. I've been big into video games my whole life. There's something I did do that I don't think a lot of people did, and I did it most days after school when I got home. And I was actually writing. I am and was a huge Star Wars fan. One of the ways I expressed that was in writing Star Wars fan fiction. Now, fan fiction kind of has this bad rap of being all slash fic. What would happen if Harry Potter and Snape fell in love and stupid shit like that? But the thing is, at its base, what fan fiction allows you to do is it allows people to write without having to create their own universe from scratch. And with Star Wars and the sort of fiction that I wrote, I used the universe, but I didn't usually use the characters. I typically made my own characters and my own plots. And then from fan fiction, I found a site where people played this game and wrote stories for it, and it was Star Wars as well. So after nearly every day when I got home from school, I would be writing these stories with people from across the world. A lot of people in the US, some people also in Canada, some in Europe, and we'd get together on these online forums, which I don't think are as big now with the advent of social media and YouTube and all those things. But I think back then forums were huge. And we'd get on these forums and we'd write stories. So my idea of fun back then, when it wasn't video games, was actually writing stories. Now that doesn't mean that I always knew I was going to be a writer. In fact, you only go back maybe 3 years and I thought it essentially impossible that I could be a writer or even someone who writes novels. I'm technically not someone who writes novels yet. I'm a first draft into my first one. But I mean, hopefully this starts a career of writing novels. So even though I wrote nearly every day back in high school and, you know, outside of schoolwork, because that's what most kids, get the fuck out of my lane. Because most kids only write whatever they need to get through school, and I actually wrote because I enjoyed it. Even though that's the case, I didn't think that's what I was going to do with my life. And I think you can say that too about the kids who scribble in their books in the back of the class. Just because they're really good at drawing doesn't mean they think they're going to be artists. Doesn't mean that's what they're shooting for. So then I, you know, survived through high school. Got my diploma as quickly as I could, got out of there. And then I was sort of faced with this, what do I do? And I had no idea what to do. And in Quebec, the nice thing is you can go to college pretty cheaply before university. And actually, if you want to go to university in Quebec, you have to go to college. We call it cégep here. And you either get these programs that prepare you for university that are a bit more general, or you can also have these technical programs, which I think are the equivalent of technical degrees in the States, where you learn a trade or a specific job before you go out into the workforce. And I'm looking at these things that are available and I have no idea what I want to do. I mean, the two options I'd singled out were graphic design and law enforcement, which are about as opposite as it gets. And I ended up choosing graphic design because I had long hair at the time and I didn't want to cut it. So it shows you about how important that decision was for me. All I knew is I had to keep going and I had to pick something. And it was important for me to pick the right thing. I needed to get it right the first time. That's something else that I can talk about. I used to want to get it right the first time, and I hated trying things because I hated getting it wrong. And I've had to change that. So I go in graphic design. It's a 3-year technical program, and it's a 3-year technical program where you're learning the basics of design on a theoretical level, but also on a practical level. And it's not an easy program. You've got a 40-hour schedule of courses, and then you've got at least that much time per week to do the work, because the way the program is structured is you get a project. So an example of a project we did once was we had to design beer bottles and their accompanying case, and we would get a country and the assignment was that the beer had to represent that country. So you'd get that project, you worked for it during class time, but you always needed time outside of class to work on it. If you only relied on your class time to get it done, it wouldn't get done. So there's a lot of work involved outside of that week. I don't know where I'm going with that. Anyway, I picked a program, it was a lot of work, and I stuck to it, and I finished it. Then I finished that, and I realized while I'm doing the program that I'm not very good at graphic design. I was good at selling my project to the class, in the sense that even if there was something glaringly wrong with it, I could spin it so it sounded like it was part of the concept. Is there somebody over there? I don't think there is. So I learned that I wasn't very good at the actual design part, but I could actually convince people that my project wasn't as bad as it obviously was. So at the end of the degree, I'm looking at all the people I graduated with who are headed into these graphic design careers. I'm thinking to myself, I'm not in my field at all. This is not where I want to go. So then I have to start looking for university, and that was even worse than cégep. One of the advantages, though, is that in university, so many programs have these prerequisites, like all the sciences, all the math, and so on, that a lot of the doors were closed for me, so it made the choice a lot easier. I had an advertising class during the degree, which I really enjoyed. Again, wasn't very good at it, but it was probably my favorite class throughout the program. So I figured, you know what, I'll use these graphic design skills as a base,